Welcome to the Reinvented Life with Pamela Chanel David. Do you want to step up your game? Pursue your dreams. Be the best version of yourself. The Reinvented Life is here to help. The Reinvented Life is about courage. It's about staying relevant. It takes grit. It defies gravity. It's about taking inventory of where you are today and where you want to go. Embrace change, make things possible, and reinvent your life. Call in with questions at 888-994-4995. Now, it's time to reinvent your life with Pamela Chanel.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Reinvented Life. Always so good to welcome all our listeners and all our viewers back here. And today we have part 2 of a show we began last week, of a story that we began to unfold to bring to you a topic that's very, very difficult for a lot of people to understand. And today we're bringing back Renee Miller for a part 2 on this show. And it's in Renee's story that people can find hope. They can find hope in very, very difficult topics of grief, of addiction, of mental health issues. These are topics that people tend to want to steer away from, but we're bringing them to you on the Reinvented Life because we feel it's important to get this word out there, that there is hope and there are resources. And we're welcoming today a woman that not only professionally deals with this as a marriage family therapist specializing in trauma, but has certainly, she and her family, been through their share of it personally, and is a light in the sense that she brings hope to so many. With that, I'd love to welcome Renee for this very special edition. We will be an hour with you here today, talking about it all and really delving into the resources that are there for those people. Welcome, Renee, to the Reinvented Life.
Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to have you back. And as I say, what you've dealt with in your professional career and now personally are topics that a lot of people steer away from hearing about. And what today's show is all about, as a follow-up from last week's, is the light. And I am very struck still from last week that love and grief can actually live simultaneously, and that the life of your precious daughter continues to bring hope and shed light to the world. We are going to run a clip here, a couple-minute clip of our last week's show to catch those people that didn't see that show up as a start to where we're going to begin our discussion today.
And so, at one point during middle school, I'll back up a little bit, she did start using drugs to kind of manage her symptoms. She really should have been diagnosed with bipolar also earlier, but she wasn't. She'd go through bouts of not sleeping and kind of mania, but nobody really wanted to diagnose her. So we had to make the hard decision at 16 to put her in treatment. We had to put her in a residential treatment facility. Hardest thing we ever did, almost second hardest thing we ever went through with her. And it really helped her. She started cooking for the girls in the house. And remember when I said she did that thing in first grade about the juicy ripe tomatoes? Well, she was a chef, not an actress. So yeah, she started cooking. And when she got out of treatment, she landed a job at 16 at a major restaurant in San Francisco. And she stayed there and she worked her little tushy off. And we had never seen her so focused. She had never been that focused yes, chef, no chef. We're like, who is this kid? So
Yeah.
she ended up working her way through all the stations and then working herself into her first Michelin star restaurant. And it was amazing. We got to eat there. She cooked for us. It's one of our just most cherished memories of her. She was in her element. She was an artist. And so she would know how to plate the food and to make it look lovely. And so she went from that restaurant to another Michelin star restaurant. So it was Commonwealth in San Francisco and then Sons and Daughters for any of you in the Bay Area. Commonwealth is no longer there. So Sons and Daughters was the last restaurant she was in, and then COVID hit and she couldn't work. And as you know, everything shut down. Restaurants were hit particularly hard. So COVID hit and her drug use went up. And she was trying to mitigate her symptoms with Xanax, which is prescribed by her psychiatrist, by the way. And if any of you have seen the Xanax show on Netflix, you know that that's not a great thing to be giving kids or anybody because it's highly addictive. And she wasn't getting enough from the psychiatrist, so she started getting it off the streets. Now, she knew about fentanyl. She was pretty street savvy. But we spent a ton of time with her the years of COVID. And although we stayed really close as a family, she was going down. And we were trying to get her into treatment and you can't do it as easy at 22 as you can do it at 16 because she's an adult. So she tried some different things outpatient. They weren't enough. And she went to Sacramento to get something more for herself. And we got the fateful call. She OD'd and she didn't make it. And that was a hard call to get. So her and her dad, we had to drive. We had to drive to Sacramento and get her car and say goodbye to her. So it's a pretty brutal story. But I can't tell you how much she's with me. She's with me now going, it's okay, Mom, you can do this. So this depicts.
So there for everyone is the story that we told last week on the show. And again, I would be remiss, Renee, if I didn't thank you. Thank you for coming forward with something that is so difficult, is so raw, but it's so real. And that's what I want people to understand, how real this is and how important it is in this to still celebrate the amazing and gorgeous and difficult at times and trying at times, but beautiful life that she had and what she brought forward in her short amount of time in her earthly being. How amazing and what a contribution she was, not just to your family, but everyone that knew her and everyone that is now getting to know her, because she is still with us in that way. And that's where I'd really like to open this up, is to again show our viewers and talk about for our listeners the beautiful life that she was. And we've brought some pictures up so that people can see that are watching who she was. And the first one I think is most important is those are both of your girls. And I think you can start there in talking about her and your beautiful daughters.
Yeah, those are my two girls. Yeah, Ariana's the blonde. It's vanilla and chocolate there. Well, I feel like I need to mention my other daughter who has gone through this with us. She's 4 years younger than Ariana, and boy, she's amazing. We brought her home. She had just started college when Ariana passed, and we had to make the decision, do you want to go back? Do you want to take a year off? What do you need? And she decided it was really hard, but she decided to go back, and she went back to a college in Puget Sound, and then realized that wasn't a fit for her, transferred to Santa Cruz, and has been in Santa Cruz for the last couple of years since Ari passed. And she's doing amazing. She's going into her senior year. I have to mention her because her resilience and her ability to keep moving forward has just been something to see for us, inspiring for us as well. So I wanted to give her a mention there as well. So thanks for
Absolutely.
putting
Absolutely. And I think that's so important is the families. This is not just affect the parents, it affects the siblings, it affects the extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends. That when this happened, this is something that will change everyone's life forever. And I think it's so beautiful that we do start with that picture because that is still your legacy.
definitely.
As we look at some of these other photos of her, especially the ones in the kitchen of the restaurants that you mentioned, there she is, so beautiful and so vibrant. She actually achieved and found a passion in life that takes people a long time to find. And I'd
She
love you
did.
to talk about that.
She had a persistence like nobody I've ever seen. And when she found it with cooking, she was laser focused. And so she never would let me take pictures. So if I was at her restaurant, I'd always have to take them on the sly a bit. But she started out, I'll mention the restaurant, Foreign Cinema in San Francisco, for some of you that know. And she was there for close to 4 years. Hard work, really, really hard. But she was focused and she learned a lot there. And that's when she was able to springboard off into her Michelin star experience after that, her and her mama. So, I mean, I think I'm so grateful that she had that at such a young age. She started at 16, knowing what we know now, that she wasn't going to have a long life. She got to experience that and to experience what it felt like to excel at something and be good at something and strive for something important to her. So that was an amazing thing to watch, and so happy that she got that.
And to achieve that at 16, I mean, to
Yeah.
be able to start down that path so early. And she was so, as we talked about last week when we looked at some of her art that she created, and certainly her cooking and was an art form in terms of her food. Her creative genius just absolutely was striking. And I think it's so important that people realize that with the battles that she was going through from a very early age, again, as you've described, there still was very bright moments. You can see the vibrancy with you in that photo. Just a huge life.
Yeah, I mean, she was amazing. And it really does speak to, like, when we see people struggling that either have mental health or substance use issues, that is not all of who that person is. They are, like all of us who have struggles at times, amazing, multi-dimensional beings that are, creative and smart and have something to offer the world. And so I think it's really important to see a person like Ariana in her totality, with all of the struggles, which I've spoke about, but all of her strengths and the light that she brought into so many. And when you were talking about her friends, like, she had amazing relationships with her friends, one of whom really, really struggled, couple, but one in particular after Ari passed. And she was, she had to take a year off basically of her life to regroup after it happened. So yes, it doesn't just affect the immediate family. There's a ripple effect when something like this happens. And, because she had such a vibrant, big personality, when that personality leaves the earthly realm, you feel it. And her friends have really felt it. And what's kind of beautiful is they all keep in touch with me. And so I feel like through them, I have a piece of her that I get to still connect with. And that's been a beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful for you guys for keeping in touch with me. Thank you for that.
Oh, it's amazing. And yes, when we talked preparing for this show, we talked about the effect on this whole generation and what they're facing right now in terms of not just one loss, but you told me in one of her friends' cases, multiple losses.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we're having a really big problem with people that have these issues right now. And one of Ariana's friends, I think, has lost 3 people in the last year and a half. And I do talk with her a lot, and we were talking a lot about, just some of the statistics with fentanyl and how, COVID was the big epidemic, right? And everything shut down and people were afraid to die or get really sick from COVID, yet fentanyl is actually killing more people. Fentanyl is coming into the country. It's, I think, produced in China, but coming through Mexico. And, we are just starting to make a little bit of inroads, but it's coming in quicker than law enforcement can handle. And it's killing a generation. It really is. And I think what's important to talk about is these kids that have these issues years ago had more of a chance to recover because things like fentanyl were not on the streets. But now with fentanyl, some kids like Ariana, who could have gotten back into treatment and was really headed that way, didn't have that chance. And other kids that don't even have major addiction issues, but might be getting a pill like a Percocet or something from a friend because they have pain. And this fentanyl is in the pill, are being taken out. So we are losing a generation that aren't getting the chance to recover. And relapse is a part of recovery. I don't know if people know that, but people don't usually just recover in one shot. Usually people get into treatment or they get into sobriety and then they relapse. That's the more usual trajectory. And then they get into treatment again and they learn from their relapses about what their triggers are. You learn from your mistakes, right, in life. And so that there has to be a progression and a maturity for people. They need that time. And with something like fentanyl on the streets, they're not getting that time. And so it's an epidemic. It's terrible.
It's so important that you speak to this. And this is why your story, Ari's story, all of it, your family's story is critical to talk about because she was not alone. She was with the most nurturing, amazing family. And I think it's important that people know that if they're struggling with this, or their children are struggling with this, that there's not a blame here to be had. It's how can we, and I say we as a community, gather around and really support such an important issue of today. I mean, a synthetic opioid like fentanyl, like you say, is taking out a generation here. It's so fast. With such small doses, lives are being lost in moments. And that is the key. how does that issue get broadcast? How does that issue get talked about? We need to raise this conversation. And that's why I personally am so grateful for your bravery, for your courage to come on and talk not just about her life, but so eloquently and with such knowledge and such amazing wisdom that people need to hear. I know
Yeah.
you've received personally support in different groups that you've become part of. And we're going to talk about some resources here because that's a pivotal part that people know what's out there. But before we do that, and there's a perfect one as an example. There are resources out there for people to really get support from as part of their own healing. And even if they haven't lost children, they've experienced addictions within their family. So if you would just share that a little bit, because what I really want to lead into is how she is still with us as well, and how she is with you and how you see her and the signs that she's sending you. So to just start off that, how does one even realize that not only is there help there, but start to get over those hurdles?
Well, there's so many organizations that I've learned about since this happened that I wish I would have known about while we were struggling and while she was struggling. And, there's so many. This is one of them that I really just recently learned about. Um, it's interesting, and we'll get more into this, but I have conversations with Ariana in many ways, and she lets me know she's around. And one of the things that she has nudged me towards is that she needed a mentor. Like she needed
Mm.
somebody that could understand her complexity and her struggle. And, we tried with therapists. I'm a therapist myself, but we couldn't find the right person. When she was really young, I have to say we did have a great therapist. I hope she's hearing this because she had a really good therapist when she was younger. But as she got older and during her high school and subsequent years, she needed somebody who could understand the complexity of what she was going through, both internally and externally. And that other slide, Partners to End Addiction, they do mentorship programs, and a
Mm.
lot of these, helping parents heal. Oh, hold it there for a moment, because that's a really important one too that I want to come back to. But right now, I just want to talk about the resources for parents and kids when they're actually in it. And the last slide, the Parents Against Addiction, I think they offer so much support for parents to call in and know how to help their kids and get support on what to say. They have parent advocates. They have mentorship programs for kids. I mean, all of that would have been so helpful for us to know about. That's why I'm putting it out there. Helping Parents Heal has been a godsend for me. This one right here, after Ari passed, I was led their way. Elizabeth Boyson started this organization after she lost her son many years ago, and he kind of nudged her to do this. Now it's national, and you can go on Facebook. You can be anonymous. You can comment on people's posts. You get support with other people that have lost their kids, and it's been invaluable. Not only do you get support, they have affiliate groups for substance use loss, for suicide loss, for different kinds of loss. They have Helping Parents Heal for siblings. They have all kinds of videos and things that you can look at as far as how to connect with your child in spirit. And I think the thing that I love about this organization, and some people will be into this and some not, but it's all about shining light parents. So it's all about keeping that continuing bond going with your child. And that's what helps with our healing. And I can't tell you, it's been a game changer for us and for me to understand that I can continue my relationship with Ariana in spirit, and that we are eternal beings. And this is just one life, one expression of our souls. And that when we pass over, we go back to the one, but the love doesn't die. The love and the bond continues. And through that love, we can continue to communicate. And that's what Helping Parents Heal has taught me and thousands of other people. And so I just can't thank them enough for what they're doing, what Elizabeth and Irene have done to help people. They have a conference every 2 years. We all go. We all listen to all the speakers and mediums, all the research on life after death, all the big researchers. These are scientists researching this. They're even, Gary Schwartz is researching a soul phone, if you can believe it or not. He's a scientist on, and there are people doing this work so that we can evolve our communication with our loved ones in spirit. So exciting stuff, and so healing for people. Imagine when you realize that you haven't lost your loved one, that they're still there in another form, and that you can still communicate. Imagine how that helps with grief and loss. So they don't even use the word bereaved parent. They use shining light parent because you haven't lost anything. Your child has changed form, but the love and the connection is still there. So
What an
there she is.
amazing way. And I'm very excited to show these next 3 series of pictures that you provided, because they are a visual. And for those listening, you'll hear the description on the podcast. They're a visual of exactly what you're talking about, is continued communication. And her form has changed, but this light is so evident. So I'm excited for you to describe these 3 photos.
Okay. Well, I had just gone to a grief retreat, and the retreat, it was just about 3 weeks ago, was in Connecticut, but this is in Washington Square in New York on the way back. And we had done a ton of connecting with our children, and it was about transcending grief. It wasn't about staying stuck in the grief. So we were doing a lot of connection work. So I'm in Washington Square Park, and a friend that was there with me took this picture. It's hard to see it here, but there was a bunch of colors around the light. So I didn't even know that was happening. And what I need to say about this picture is, before this, I sometimes imagine Ariana, like when she was at different stages in her upbringing, and I was imagining what it was like to kiss her little feet when she was a baby. I know that's kind of a random thing, but I was like, oh, I just want to remember those little feet. So that was in my mind somewhere around when this picture was taken. And then you'll see in subsequent pictures why that's relevant.
So that is a closer look at that.
It's a closer look. You can I got to put my glasses on to see it. So, all right. I don't know. Some of you might see it and some not, but I know that this is her. So if you look, this is a little foot right there. But when you look up here, her eyes are staring down at me. And I know that's her because I know her eyes and I know her energy. And I did not see that in the picture right away. I had to blow it up. But I really believe that's Ariana looking down at me and showing me her little foot to show me that she hears me. And I think she hears my thoughts.
Yeah, and in the next picture that's even closer, you'll see that foot. So there
it is. And I don't know if you saw any of the pictures of her eyes, but she's got really big eyebrows, and those are her eyes, and she is showing me her foot right there. And so I get signs like this. This was an amazing one. I think she's getting better at it, to be honest with you. But I get lots of signs. If you remember my poem from last week, I take pictures of the stream. And it is a place that we have put some of her ashes because her and I used to walk there. And I get all kinds of images when I blow them up. I have seen her before in the images, but this one was kind of miraculous and it's undeniable. And we all talk about, all of us parents that have lost kids talk about these undeniable signs that we get, and we share that with each other. It's not something you can talk about so easily, but I'm talking about it. I'm a therapist. I learned how to do therapy in a, very pragmatic way, but I'm also a spiritual being. We all are. And I think it's important that anybody that loses somebody understands this, that they can continue that relationship, that there can be communication, that your loved one is supporting you and loving you from the other side. I think Ariana wants me to speak out about all this. I think that she is nudging me to talk about this greater reality. And that's one of the reasons that I'm doing this, because I think in that is healing for everybody. And it's kind of cool.
It is. I mean, it's undeniable, the relationship there in that photo, that the two of you share. And I know you've been very open about talking about just how close you were and are. Again, that's not to say, and I really like to be very realistic, it's not to say that as parents there wasn't struggles, and as the children there wasn't struggles. But you have unfortunately had to deal with such grief. And what I love about what you were saying is converting that, reinventing that. And that's what the theme of this show. And I always go back to and have to remind people we can reinvent our thoughts about anything and actually create some different results. And so the negative, the overwhelm that people could be consumed with, I'm personally amazed, and you see it in that photo, in your smiles, that you've converted that you've been able to take that, and with the organization's help that you talked about, and I know readings and a lot of resources that you've been open to, you have been able to take this what would have been grief, and it is still grief, but have formed it into love and into that shining light. How does one do that? I know you've started with a new thought about it, but I think you could be of such help when you describe that shining light to people that are listening.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked that, because it's, there's so many ways to do it. I can tell you my process, and I can tell you some of how I help other people that are grieving. And again, it doesn't have to be just grieving a child. That is the ultimate loss, but grieving a parent, grieving a friend, grief is grief, right? So I think one of the things that it's important for people to understand is that we don't really lose the grief. We take the grief with us, and it transforms us. And that's been my experience. And in a sense, allowing ourselves to feel grief and to have moments even each day. The last 2 years, it's been close to 2.5 years since Ari passed. I spend time in nature, even if it's just for a half hour every day. And sometimes I've listened to podcasts with mediums and people from Helping Parents Heal, or Suzanne Giesman. I have to mention her. She's been a godsend to me. She is a Navy commander that lost her stepdaughter and is now a medium. So she's gone from complete one side of the brain to the other, and she's very credible. And I listen to a lot of her podcasts on how to connect with spirit. I meditate. I try to meditate daily because I have to quiet down my own mind so that deeper, higher information can come in. Movement is important. There's a man that does healing through yoga. If you can see this, Paul Dennison, he does movement, grief yoga. Reading about the work of David Kessler is really important too. He's also like a grief expert that studied with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and did all this work around grief, and then lost his son at 21 years old, and ended up kind of in grief group with his own books on the table with a hat on. I always love this story because I feel like I'm also holding both sides. I help people with this and I'm grieving at the same time. So the way I do it is all the things that I've mentioned. I cry regularly. I think we have to understand that grief needs to flow through our bodies. And so I am not ashamed to cry. If I need to cry, I leave space for feeling it in my body and releasing it. That's what's helping me move on. And, when I feel that deep grief, I'm also feeling the deep love I have for Ariana. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. Sometimes we don't want to let go of it because we want to feel that depth, because in that depth is the love that we share with our loved one as well. And so all of these things and doing this, Pam, coming out with this has been very, very healing for me. It was very, very scary to tell this story for obvious reasons, but being open and honest and vulnerable, I think helps other people. And it definitely helps me because I feel like I don't have to hide any of this, that through this experience, through this tragedy, I'm making meaning out of my life. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I have two children in spirit. I lost a full-term baby also after birth when I was young. And so I've had 3 C-sections. I have 1 living child. So I feel like my life has been about learning how to feel this stuff and helping other people feel their grief. And that's what I do in the work that I do. And also now learning that I can continue that connection that I didn't know I could before. So it's an evolution of making meaning out of this. And the helping other people is my path and my passion with this. And it helps me heal as well.
It's incredible. And I would venture to guess you have yet to be able to realize the amount of lives that you will be able to help. Your ability to articulate all parts of this and not hold back. And as we've mentioned more in the last show, but just even in this show a little bit, the stigmas that surround mental health issues and addiction issues, and people not feeling comfortable to come forward with them is what keeps that pain. And so whether it be the tears or the joy or any of the other emotions that you are willing to feel and to tell people about, it's helping that to pass through. And again, I go back to the Reinvented Life because those familiar with this work and this show and the processes that we do is it always starts, it always goes back to not having to dissect everything, but rather making the decision to have a new thought about whatever it is that is at hand. And then that thought leads to the habits and the routines and the lifestyles that start surrounding that more favorable journey. And so that's what I'm hearing you talk about. You're not afraid to go out into nature, the very place that brought you and her so much joy, but rather you're stepping into it. You're embracing it on a daily basis. And that just in and of itself, visiting places that were some of your favorite spots together, can bring a completeness because it indicates that that channel, that place of communication, as you're talking about, is still wide open and is still there. And I think that's the important thing for people to understand is in this unimaginable period in your life, you are able to step in and embrace and encourage others to do the things that still make them happy. and still make them feel more at peace. That's a lot of what this process is. And I love what you were saying is shining light parents. Shining light parents, whether they lost their children or they're in it now and don't know where to go. It was very telling that you said you wish some of these resources were known to you during the process, right? Would have given a little bit more insight to you that you were not alone. And I think that
Right.
is the key. So, if we could, before we talk about some of those resources you want to, can you talk about the notion of just not feeling alone? Because that loneliness is what stops people in their tracks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that it's such a vulnerable thing when you're grieving and when you've had this kind of loss, especially, and people tend to isolate and want to pull in. And that's what's so great about helping parents heal is you can go on anytime and hear somebody's story that's very similar to your own, and you
Mm.
cannot feel alone, and you can comment or not comment, and it's completely free. That's what is important for people to know. It's a free organization. You can listen, you can talk, you can create friendships. I have friends from people all over the United States now. I found some local people in that organization that we're local friends now. And talking about our kids and the beautiful lights that they were and still are, and sharing all the signs that we get with each other, and really understanding that the relationship doesn't have to end, and we don't have to hide, and we don't have to, as a culture, we don't deal with grief well. And it's really interesting when you think about it. We all have a life sentence here, right? And so we're all going to leave at some point. And we all have lost people and will lose people along the way, but we don't like to address it. And we don't talk about it with each other. And people say things like, "Are you over it yet? Are you feeling better yet?" Somebody said to my husband, "So you feeling better now?" And he was just, it's nobody's fault, right? It's just, we don't even have a language for this. And so it's really important that I think we speak to that a little bit. One of the things that I think is really important, I kind of made a little list of, you know, what I need, what other people have told me they need. So we need people to talk about our loved one. People avoid talking about the loved one that's passed. And so when you go to social functions, nobody says anything, and it feels a little bit like that person's forgotten, and they want to pretend like that person's life didn't exist or didn't matter. And to be honest with you, that's hurtful. And what would be better is if people say, I'd love to know about your loved one. How are you? How are you really doing? And I'd love, tell me about that person. Tell me about your relationship with that person. And if somebody, I'm not saying everybody will want to talk about it. Some people will say, I'd rather not talk about it, but ask, because a lot of people would feel so honored that you are remembering their loved one and allowing space for them to still be in the conversation. So it's really important not to shy away from it too much. It's a part of life. Passing on, transitioning is a part of life. And I think we need to acknowledge it more for people. And that helps people not isolate. If they know they can talk about that person and people are comfortable enough to allow for that, then there's less isolation for the grieving person. So I think that's really important.
I think that's beautiful. And what I'm hearing you say is just people knowing that there is a language and a way to address it. So often
Right.
people don't do something because they don't know what their options are. And the last
Right.
thing they may want to do is cause something that they envision may be hurtful by bringing something else. And so I love that this could be an entire show of just sharing with people what can be done. So it's
Yeah.
it's absolutely amazing when you think about that there's a whole language
Right.
to introduce people to. And
That's
I'm
right.
sure also the comfort that you can take into talking about some of these things. Like, I love seeing the pictures of her in the restaurant. And I love seeing, as you've posted on your social media, food that she's made over the years. And just seeing her art, as we saw on the last show, as I mentioned, she's a creative genius. And why not celebrate that? In the last show, you wrote a poem that so beautifully depicted an ongoing conversation between the two of you. And that's what
Yes.
I would imagine, and it's only imagining, would be able to be a conduit to keeping her alive and keeping her
Mm-hmm.
spirit
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it's interesting. I've written a handful of poems, and I
alive. Mm-hmm.
realized that it's her and I writing together, because it's sometimes in her words and sometimes in mine. And I realized that she was channeling thoughts through me. I have another one if you want me to share another little one, but
Absolutely.
it's a progression. It's a progression of my process with this. I think the
I
one that
love.
I shared last week, I was a little earlier on. This
Mm-hmm.
one is a little bit more progressed as far as the connection and what she wants me to to say and to portray.
Absolutely. We would love to hear. And
Okay.
again, you're bringing her forward with you in this.
Yeah. So let me get it here. So this is a little shorter. It's called Magic in the Universe. If I can see magic, then I can be magic. Unexpected miracles, how can that be? Faces of spirits creating electricity. We're part of something more, connected to the whole, aligned with natural forces, transcending all we think we know. There will always be more in the light that meets the eye, sometimes covered from view, seemingly dark, yet shown in the big, bright purple sky. Omnipresent, you are here, you are there, always, everywhere. How can that be? Life is an illusion of what we think we can see. We are the parts and the whole of a greater true reality.
Now I have to hold tears back. Unbelievable. And that's what this all is the reality. And what's so incredible in just these short couple of years, 2.5 years, is not only is this a reality, but it's not become a finality. And that's what really strikes me about this ongoing, transformed relationship, not just with yourself, but you said it, it's omnipresent, it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's such, again, I'm going to use the word gift that you are bringing, because you are bringing light, you are bringing hope to so many that don't know honestly where to start.
Right.
And I'm not sure that people really think about this ahead of time or would even know where to start. So the resources, you started talking about one earlier, but we're going to put several resources up on the screen. And again, there's many more. I know there's books, I know there's groups you're part of, but we've brought forward some of those that have really offered you and your family some great support. So why don't we kind of go through those so that people know where to turn?
Well, this is one I just recently really learned of from another parent on helping parents heal. And, they do parent groups. The parents are trained to help other parents. And then they have mentorship groups and, things for high risk kids and all kinds of stuff and it's all free. That's a lot of these are nonprofit organizations, and they don't charge for their services, and they're really out there to support parents. That's one of them. Another one is Shatterproof. I'm actually going to be doing a storytelling video for them as well. They are they're really doing a lot of work about drug addiction, getting more awareness and legislation out there, as well as ending stigma. Their big thing is that's why they want me to be doing things like this. They want parents and people that have been affected by this to be speaking out, and because it helps heal and it helps people not feel alone. So that they're another really great organization. I just wanted to share a couple of books that, I mean, there's so many out there, and whoever hears this, if I didn't mention your book, it's not because I don't think it's wonderful, but I just had to grab a few that have been meaningful for me. David Kessler is an amazing speaker and grief coach. He does trainings for parents. He does trainings for professionals to become certified grief counselors. He's lost a child himself, and also I think his mother early on. He's an amazing man that has done a lot of work, and he created the 6th stage of grief, which is finding meaning. When you can make meaning, this is what I work on with my clients. When you can make meaning out of tragedy and understand it on a deeper level, that maybe there was some deeper purpose. We haven't really gotten into that, but there's this brings me to my next book, Journey of Souls. And there's some thoughts and some research out there that we kind of come in with our soul families, and we kind of have imprints about when we're leaving and what we're trying to teach each other here, and why would I have to lose a child when she's 22 years old? Like, why would I have to go through that? From a human perspective, it's terrible and there's no good reason. But from a soul perspective, he talks about that in this book. And he talks about why we choose to go through these things so that our soul grows and that we are helping each other grow. Great book. It's like the life between lives or life after life. He talks about this and has research about people's in between lives. On back to helping parents heal, there's this book about life to afterlife, and they also have a Netflix series. Elizabeth, who started Helping Parents Heal, has this book out in a Netflix series about this. Lots of great stuff in there and interviews. The healing through yoga movement's been paramount for me. Hiking, being in nature, yoga, quieting down the body and the mind so that I can get deeper inspiration and insights coming in. So those are just a few. Sherry Dillard's book on, she's a medium who wrote about what happens after you pass. And that was like one of the first medium books I read. And I don't have it because I gave a copy to a friend, but I mean, just learning that there's a whole evolution that we go through after we pass, and that our loved ones are actually surrounded by their spirit guides and soul families and angels, and they're taken care of. They're not in pain. They're not in a black abyss somewhere. They're good. They're probably having an easier time than we are here, most likely. So all of this stuff is what's helped me transcend the grief. And I'm still in that process. I'm not going to tell you I don't have hard days. I do, but I'm having better and better days as I'm able to hold this more and understand it and really integrate it into who I am. And then help my clients with this. I do brain spotting and EMDR, which helps with this kind of stuff and helps people get in touch with their higher self and heal old wounds. And I think it dovetails nicely into the work that I do as well. So that's my process.
Absolutely. I mean, for us to talk about this subject and what you're bringing forward, which is meaning, and hearing the notion of finding meaning in all of this, that is wisdom. That is a golden nugget. And not only, as I mentioned when we first started, are you professionally trained in this, but now are personally going through this process and are so rich in the accepting of opening thoughts and opening possibilities. and in all aspects of life. That's really what it comes down to. I go back to the reinvented life again because it's about embracing change. And I opened last week's show up with, in the, I think 4 years now, we've had this show, 3 to 4 years. There's not a story that we have brought forward that is as rich in that embracing of change. And one thing I love that you were just saying is that no matter what the circumstances are, it's growth. And when one experiences growth, they're able to experience a greater proximity, closer to, however you want to think about it, to their souls.
That's right.
That our souls are at the root of it. And so much of what we go through is the learnings that take place that we're here to learn. And to learn that there can be love amidst the grief. To learn that there could be light amongst the dark.
Right.
To learn that she continues to have not just an earthly impact, but I don't think you've begun to see the impact that her life, that you're giving her life and continuing to be that guiding light with her, right alongside her, not even for her, will be helping millions of people. I can see it so clearly that all she went through was for a greater purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that greater purpose is to know that there are resources, there are help, there is all of that. But at the end of the day, her struggle was not in vain at all.
Right. Right. Yeah, she is still, and I gotten information from her that her goal and her part of what she's working on, because we still work on things over there, is helping others that struggled like she did. And that is one thing that's very coming through very strongly. And she gave me a little sign. She does things with my electronics when I know she's around. And I took a picture this morning and it turned completely upside down. That's one of her signs to me. And I said, okay, I know you're here. Cool. We'll do this
Wow.
together.
Wow. Amazing. Yes, her struggle was certainly not in vain, and certainly not, unfortunately, unique. I think it's very much a part of the progression of where we are today. And it's so critical that people don't, going back to what we talked about, feel alone. So as we wrap this up, is there one or two sort of highlights, shining lights? We're going to put that beautiful picture of her back up here because that's what I want people to really remember. I know that's what you want people to remember. Her is that shining light of who she was. I love this picture of her. And is there one or two things that you would like to wrap up with? There she is.
I just want to say how much I love her. I think you can see it with us. We have a tremendous love. I think that transcends her loss, her death, and that there's more than meets the eye in so many ways. And, you know, let's try not to judge others. Let's try to understand others' struggle and not judge it, because there's just a lot of a wealth of good things in most people if we take the time to see who they are and to pull out their strengths. And I wish she had more of that in her life. of people doing that for her. I think it could have made a huge difference, but it teaches us that when we see somebody struggling, we have the opportunity to turn the other way or to lend a hand out or an ear and try to understand each other better. And I think that's what she needed. She told me she needed more of a mentor and people that understood her. And I think that that's something we can all do better with each other, and something that she was telling me to put out into the world.
Well, we couldn't end, given this story, on a more uplifting note. The two of you are absolutely beautiful. Your entire family is tremendous. And that is what it's all about. It's the mentorship, it's the partnering in anything in life, collaborating with people that understand. And as I close the show, I want to remind everyone to inspire, to find that goodness in people, and to know that the changes that can take place, even in something as could be dark as this, that there's light that can shine. And that change is about growth, and it's about light, and it's about creating something anew. Thank you, Renee, for your vulnerability, your transparency. I think I've said it 3 times in this show, but cannot thank you enough, because this work that you are just embarking on and will continue to do will be, as I say, just a landmark for so many people to land. And I know you're going to be, and she is going to be, affecting in a most positive way so many lives. So I wish you the best in your continued healing journey, and cannot wait to continue this conversation with you and bringing all these fabulous resources forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you to all the viewers, to all the listeners, and hopefully to the learnings that have taken place from listening to this, and knowing that there's always hope. There's always a way to embrace possibilities, to embrace change, and to reinvent any kind of circumstance you might need to, or want to, or dream of. Can't wait to see you again next week on our show, and wish you the best in all of your reinventing.
Thank you for tuning in to The Reinvented Life with Pamela Chanel David. Tune in each week so we can work and grow together to become the best version of ourselves. Keep striving, keep dreaming, keep working, and embrace change. You may contact Pamela Chanel at info@thereinventedlife.com.